Welcome back to Eagle Countdown. I hope you enjoyed that message from Senator Rand Paul. If you heard that back and forth between he and I, he has a great history with our organization. His father, Dr. Ron Paul, and Phyllis Schlafly were allied. In fact, I mentioned in that interview with him, and if you see it now, the update of A Choice Not an Echo, the Phyllis Schlafly Classic, includes an introduction by Dr. Ron Paul, which was really fun at the time that was being put together to work with him on that. So our next guest, so one of the things we've done, by the way, on Eagle Countdown, in the weeks as we built up to it, we had hoped we would be doing Eagle Counsel in person, and that's been delayed till January of the new year because of all the challenges we face. And when we decided to do this virtual gathering and get feedback, and get together, we asked for feedback on issues and on people and topics that we could talk about that we're all going through, because getting ourselves up to speed on issues and hearing from experts, that's one of the things we love to do at Eagle Counsel. So our next guest is someone that Rebecca Ganter, our DC director, knows, but we also, on these issues, it was an important topic. And Jonathan Alexandre is the Senior Counsel for Government Affairs for the Liberty Counsel Action. And the Liberty Counsel, most of our team knows, but we'll let Jonathan talk a little more about it. His background is as an attorney. He was Assistant General Counsel or Public Policy Coordinator for the Massachusetts Family Institute up in Boston, where he's from. He did some worked at the Jerusalem Center of Public Affairs in Jerusalem as a scholar, and also United States Army Judge Advocate General's Legal Center and School. He's got a law degree, as I mentioned, Liberty University, and married, lives in Northern Virginia now, and not in the swamp, but near the swamp. And so, Jonathan, welcome to the Eagle Countdown. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So one of the things we're doing, and we're talking policy, but we are talking about, in this sort of through line for the Eagle Countdown, is the promises kept by the Trump administration. Trump-Pence administration, they ran a little bit earlier. I think our viewers saw us talk to Paul Teller, and he was kind of joking and laughing, saying most candidates and politicians run for office and they keep a few promises. It feels like President Trump and Pence administration have been obsessed with living up to it. Our book, Top 100 Trump Promises Made, Promises Kept. What's your favorite? It doesn't have to be even related to your work if you don't want. What's your favorite promise kept of this administration?
I think him moving the embassy to Jerusalem was a huge statement.
That's a popular one. We've had like 3 people do that one. Yeah,
absolutely.
Go ahead.
I mean, the past 6 presidents have all promised it. He was the only one that had the boldness to do it, regardless of what the threats were from a Palestinian territory that said they would revolt or have terrorist attack. He said that wouldn't matter, that this was a non-starter. We're certainly going to move the Jerusalem embassy from the United States, the official U.S. embassy in Jerusalem, and he kept that promise.
Do you think, tell our folks about Liberty Counsel Action, and tell us what you're doing, what the main issues are, and how that fits into this into the Washington D.C. ecosystem.
Yeah, certainly. So we represent clients all over the country. Our legal firm, it's an official constitution litigation firm, and we'll provide legal counsel on areas of pro-life, religious liberty, of course, a central issue, natural marriage, and the family. And so our clients, one of our more infamous clients would be Kim Davis. She was the Kentucky clerk.
Sure. She's not infamous for us. She's famous.
Right.
She's good.
I should have said famous.
Yeah.
And so cases like that where individuals want to believe a certain way in their heart, but also go out in the public square and express that religious belief. Anytime government tries to cut in between an individual's belief and practice in the public square, we like to stand by their side and remind government that their chief end is to stay out of a religious person's right to exercise their religious liberty.
How have you found with and I know Rebecca Ganter has got personal experience with this, but the pandemic, I think most Americans, and I'm a lawyer too, and we know that our rights, they come from God, right. But we have a tradition that at times, you can't kill somebody, there's limits to our freedom and relation, and I think most Americans were willing to say, okay, we've got a pandemic, what are we going to do about it? And then we watched as it went too far in cases. It was uneven, and particularly on some of the core beliefs people have. How's business been since the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'll remember very early on, this is back in April, a pastor was arrested at his home because previously, the Sunday before, he had held service. And he had held service in a way that, his congregants were social distanced. They weren't near each other. They were singing songs of praise. But he was arrested because the sheriff at the time thought that he was violating CDC guidelines. That goes beyond the pale in America for a pastor to be holding church and be arrested. And so we came to the defense of Dr. Howard Brown, was able to give him a comprehensive victory where the Florida governor actually changed the law that very day, favoring churches' rights to still operate in their constitutional mandate and to have worship, despite what the COVID dust up otherwise would have had all churches across the country shut down.
So business is up, is my point. There's lots
Absolutely.
of Rebecca has experience with that, but we had some questions. And also, if people have questions out there, in whether they're on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, Periscope, feel free to send them in, and we get them into our system here. And here's just a straight up question. One of our folks says, should churches, this is a little open-ended, should churches comply with government mandated closings? It's a little bit broad. I think there's probably a range of that answer, but go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would never counsel Daniel to shut his doors and not pray towards Jerusalem, right? Thankfully, our government up until this point has recognized our First Amendment ultimately gives an individual the right to free, unrestricted worship. Man's chief end is to glorify God and to worship him. Government's chief end is to stay out of their way of mankind's right to do that. And so we believe fundamentally in the First Amendment, how it's interpreted should always err on the side of an individual's right to believe a certain way, but also express that in the public square. And when they come together as a congregation and as a church, that the rights of the First Amendment also protects their ability to do that.
Good question. Thank you for the question, Aaron, for that question. Rebecca, you had some thoughts or comments?
Yes. Well, first of all, Jonathan, thank you for your work defending religious liberty. Like Ed said, it's become more personal to me recently than ever before. You might know that Governor Hogan said churches could meet, and then our county executive said we couldn't meet, and a provision was not even made for parking lot service. Right. At one point, our church was anonymously reported, so we had a health director come in twice, and so we faced some challenges there. Of course, in California, Pastor John MacArthur has been threatened with 6 months jail time. Pastor Trieber has been fined over $100,000. Right. So what can we do to push back on government's overreach in our churches?
Yeah, certainly highlighting these stories is very important. Thankfully, up until now, the Americans still recognize the right of an individual to worship. The examples that you mentioned, unfortunately aren't unique. They've gone all across the country. We've had cases in Virginia, in Illinois, of course in California. We represent a church conglomerate that has over 65,000 different churches across the world. But that church in California has been pressured by Governor Newsom to shut down, hefty fines levied against them. As you mentioned, even parking lots. So individuals very early on Easter Sunday wanted to drive their cars into a parking lot and just tune to the same radio station and listen to the sermon. But that was considered in violation of these COVID crises. And that's beyond the pale. Thankfully, the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, when he caught wind of what was going on in one example in Virginia, was on television saying that was beyond the pale. And even President Trump, you mentioned John MacArthur, President Trump was able to have John MacArthur on the phone saying, continue to meet, continue to exercise your rights of religious liberty and meet. So thankfully, despite these governors' overreach, we still have an administration that is in full agreement with our First Amendment, and when they are put to the test as to whether or not what side they will fall on, have erred on the side of religious liberty.
We're talking with Jonathan Alexander, Liberty Counsel Action. What's that website so people hear it?
So lc.org is the best landing page.
Oh, wow.
lc.org.
Oh, that's good. Got in there early.
Yeah.
lc.org. Wow.
And just with regard to the reopened churches, reopenchurch.org. So many pastors have been able to use our website and go to reopenchurch.org and see all the guidelines that we put out and all the legal defenses that individuals have to maintain open churches in their faith during this COVID death.
Comment from Facebook, one of our folks, thank you for helping. Thank you for defending Pastor Brown, who continues to stand. So thank you for that. And then here's a question. What do you see happening with regard to the threat to churches to control who they hire? Yeah. In light especially of the Bostock decision recently, is that right lost or damaged because of that forever? Where are we on that question?
That's a very troubling issue. Thankfully, the ministerial exemption still seems to be upheld. But the problem of the Supreme Court going in and parsing out what is a minister and what is not a minister is still bad, because now you have government officials saying, well, this school teacher, since they are preaching and teaching religious doctrine, then they should be under the ministerial exemption, while the individual serving in the cafeteria shouldn't be. So even the rights that they sought to take away in Bostock, they gave a little back in a subsequent Supreme Court ruling. Nevertheless, as government spreading its tentacles, involving themselves in the nature of ministries, and involving themselves in the nature of the conduct of the church in a way that is completely antithetical to what the First Amendment stands for.
LC.org, libertycounsel.org. That's an easy one. That's awesome. Rebecca, you had other questions and thoughts?
Yes. You mentioned President Trump's support for religious liberty. Of course, we're very grateful for that. And he said that churches are essential. And as you know as well, the Justice Department filed some statements of interest on behalf of churches. Is there any other steps that the administration can take to protect religious liberty, or perhaps there's actions that we should be taking at the state level?
Good question.
Yeah, that's an incredible question. The DOJ, as you mentioned, did file statements of support. They've continued to do so. They've continued to err on the side of churches remaining open. I think we'll see another crop of religious liberty issues when a vaccine is produced, and ultimately these certain states like the Commonwealth of Virginia ultimately saying that they will mandate mandatory vaccines. You're going to have a lot of religious objectors. You're going to have a lot of moral objectors. And so states and individuals will have another opportunity to challenge government's right to force them to violate their religious obligations. And I think you will see another crop of cases come out where hopefully the administration and the Department of Justice will come down on the side of freedom and an individual's right to believe a certain way in their heart regarding an issue, but also be able to express that in the public square.
As your work, and again, Jonathan Alexander is at Liberty Counsel Action. I say that because I want to be careful, because I'm not. Sometimes action means you're on the C4 side and C3 side, but I say it right. I know. But has your work expanded over now in this period to schools? A lot of people are really unhappy with the schools, have been for a long time, but the crisis has put a different kind of light on here. You know, earlier tonight we had one of our Eagle Countdown guests, and he said everybody's looking at the schools, looking over the shoulder of their kids, the public schools, and saying, what is that? Right. But the protections, at the same time, I think it was that one of our viewers commented that their child can't pray at school, public school. They said, don't pray before lunch. What's the education component of what's happening? And are you in that, or is it not quite in your bailiwick?
Yeah, absolutely. For the past 30 years, we provided counsel to teachers who want to be able to hold on to their religious convictions even as they're teaching in public schools, but also students' right to bring their Bibles to school and read that during times where students are allowed to read. Good news clubs, the right of students to organize gospel-centered clubs on the school property, praying at the school flag, but also anytime, even during a curriculum, during a teaching moment, whenever the history is discussed, a student still maintains his rights to display the truth about a historical Jesus Christ and talk about their faith within the context of their lesson. So we've always been, on the side of teachers, parents, and school administrators wanting to hold on and retain their religious rights while they're operating in the school. I think it's a Tinker v. Des Moines case that say neither children nor teachers check out or lose their constitutional rights when they enter into the schoolhouse gates. And we've done all the effort that is necessary to ensure that that is maintained.
Jonathan Alexander, Liberty Counsel Action. You got another one? I want to keep going. I want to leave you out. Rebecca does has been a lot on the front lines on this question.
Yeah, so another question would be, what can we do to help pastors that are facing, I guess, religious persecution at this time? It's obviously not religious persecution like you would see overseas, but I was able to help my pastor get in connection with some of the folks at Liberty Counsel, and we appreciate your help. But I know for myself personally, I'm feeling like I want to do more. Do you have any recommendations on what we can do to?
Yeah, certainly. So, as I said, I'll never counsel Daniel to close his doors and not stop praying towards Jerusalem. This is an opportunity for the church to be the church, and of course, you want to be, respectful of folks that have, health issues, and even folks that are in fear because of all the guidelines that are put out by the CDC. But at the same time, it's the pastors and the churches that know best how to treat their flock. It's the shepherds that know what is best for their flocks. And no one's going to love the church more than the pastors and the people that are within the church. So everything that a pastor can take in order to protect his congregation is perfectly fine, but that's up to the pastor to do, certainly not the government to impose broad swaths of guidelines where they are favoring such things as liquor stores and marijuana shops, allowing protests with over 100,000 people in the streets, and signaling out churches. What we saw were governors and mayors who had a religious animus use this opportunity to target churches. And the biggest pushback is the pushback that was consistent during the Revolutionary War in 1776. It's consistent throughout the breadth and width of all of U.S. history. The biggest pushback is the church being the church, saying that they're not afraid to continue meeting as the First Amendment gives them, or recognizes the right for them to do.
Jonathan Alexander, Liberty Counsel, Action, LC.org. Now, I want to tell you, try this out. I don't think I've said this on the Eagle Countdown. I have said it on my radio show. But if you think of 1960 until today, and you look back at the Supreme Court cases, and of course, most of our folks know Roe v. Wade and all the, but you can add into that the marriage decisions, Bostock. But you go back to 60, they started to systematically take religion, take God out of public schools. So I think that 1960 was the beginning of what I call the modern dark age. And the dark age of American sort of jurisprudence, the cultural left, all that ascension. And my assessment is our other through line for the Eagle Countdown is on the brink. And people think I mean on the brink of Antifa and on the brink of election chaos. And I do a little bit. I also think we might be on the brink of a golden age. Because think about the Supreme Court, if there's a confirmation in the next 42 days. You now have dramatically changed for the next 25 years the prospects of, now I don't think we should rely on the Supreme Court. They're way out of their role in my mind. Absolutely. But if you are going to live where we are, it's going to make a big difference on a lot of these issues that have to do more with freedom than prescribing marriage, gender, all these things. And so our people, the other kind of through line for this countdown is on the brink, next 40 days. On these issues you work on, you care about, our folks do too. What do you tell our people? What's at stake? What's in the game here? I know you're not picking candidates or elections, but the issues-wise, what is at stake?
Yeah, certainly what's at stake is there's a fundamental difference between the two candidates and their administration. We've gone to toe head-to-head with a then State Attorney General Kamala Harris, who threw pro-lifers in jail and literally would charge millions of dollars in legal fees to keep our clients away from exposing what organizations like Planned Parenthood were doing. So, seeing Senator Kamala Harris as a vice president, knowing that she'll walk in with that same sort of worldview is, completely different from a Vice President Pence that we currently have. And so the two candidates, even the vice president and the presidency, can be more diametrically opposed. And so what's at stake is a leftist ideology that will continue the negative trajectory that has stemmed from the 60s versus the new dawn of a new day that we've seen the Trump administration begin in the last 4 years and certainly hope to continue in the next 4.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan Alexander, Liberty Counsel, Action, LC.org. And there's a lot to check out there, a great resource. And we appreciate you taking the time to with us. And check out Golden Age. Think about it. We'll talk more.
Absolutely.
And we're going to go now to another one of our